It's like 10 o'clock. It's 10 o'clock. We'll call our meeting to order. All rise for prayer and pledge.
Loving God, as we begin this meeting, we ask for your guidance and wisdom. Help us to work together in harmony and purpose. Grant us clarity of thought and unity of mind so that our decisions may reflect your will and contribute to the greater good of all involved. Bless our discussions and efforts with your grace. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call members. Myself, Commissioner Stiles is here, Commissioner Wing and Commissioner Brockman are all present. We'll move on to public comments, and I have nothing on my agenda, so we're going right to the approval of the minutes.
I'll make that motion.
I'll make that motion. Having a first and a second, any further discussions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion will carry. We'll also go next to our expenditures and we do our top 10 expenditures.
Top 10 expenditure are as follows. UPMC Health Network for insurance, $214,628.83. Wilmington Trust for bond payment, $102,925. Adelphia Village CYS placements, $100,004.59. Center for Community Action programs, $69,343.35. Independent Family Services, which is for CYS placement, is $56,569.86. Also, Wilmington Trust for bond payment of $48,637.50. And Wilmington Trust for bond payment of $45,451.96. The Liberty USA, which is the election license and warranty, is $38,760. Echelon Security, which is CWS surveillance for youth, $34,010. Next, we have Veteran Development Association for second quarter 2026 allocation, which is $30,000. That's our top 10 expenditures.
Thank you. I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
A second.
Having a first and a second, any further discussions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion will carry. We have nothing under old business, but under county staff updates, awards, and bids, we do have a couple things this morning. We have Dustin Bischoff from Allegheny Broadband Inc. going to give us an update on ABI and BEAD funding. Dustin, if you would come over here.
Sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's a presentation.
I do review those.
I'll just do it.
Out of the way.
Stephanie.
Yeah.
Should I just-
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I set it up early, so it'll take a minute.
I think I know most of you here, but for those who don't know me, my name is Dustin Bishop. I'm the project manager for Allegheny Broadband Incorporated, or ABI. We're a nonprofit broadband organization with a 6-county focus, but we are headquartered in Altoona. So yeah, I wanted to speak with you all a bit about the BEAD program, where things stand right now, an overview of the program itself, and then get into a little bit more detail about Bedford County in particular. So this first slide here is just about the BEAD program at a high level pertaining to Pennsylvania as a whole. So today we're talking about the BEAD programs, I'm sure you all know, the Broadband Equity Access and Employment Program. It's very long. So this program is funded by federal dollars through the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, the NTIA, but the allocation of the funds are allocated to the states And so at the level of Pennsylvania, that pertains primarily to the PBDA, the Pennsylvania Broadband Development Authority. So Pennsylvania received a grand total of about $1.2 billion for this BEAD program. In terms of how Pennsylvania has chosen to allocate those funds, thus far, they recently awarded about $711 million for deployment funds. So deployment funds have to do with projects that are very much, on the ground, building fixed wireless tower sites, constructing fiber, that kind of thing. Any kind of services that provide internet to end users falls under deployment, while the remaining about 400 million or so is going to be for things like non-deployment funds. We don't have a good guidance just yet on how those non-deployment funds will be used, but it could be anything from, helping low-income residents for internet service, helping schools or nonprofits with their internet, things like that. So not quite large-scale fiber projects, but more on the non-deployment side of things. So I did put together a little pie chart you can see there. There's a total of 130,000 locations in Pennsylvania that, according to the PBDA, are either unserved or underserved. Unserved are residents with, little to no internet whatsoever, and then underserved are those folks who, yes, they might have internet services, but they often don't meet the needs of a modern economy. And so you can see the precise numbers there. In terms of the most recent awards that were made through the BEAD program, which at that point are now official as of just a couple of weeks ago, you can see a breakdown for how those 130,000 locations will be served. You can see about 60% for fiber, roughly 23% for LEO or satellite. LEO is the low Earth orbit. And then you can see a smattering of, some fixed wireless and some what's called hybrid coaxial, which is, a combination of fiber as well as cable. So you can see the precise breakdown there. Originally, this was, planned as almost an exclusively, or at least a very heavy priority for fiber. That is still the case with, 60% going towards fiber. But that number was much higher originally. So in recent months, there's been more of an emphasis on a more technology neutral approach for BEAD. So digging into Bedford County specifically, you'll see that the map there on the right, that's I pulled together straight off of the Pennsylvania Broadband Development Authority's website. They have a very useful, what's called a map and data tab. You can go on there yourself and sort of play around with the map and see which areas, that you're interested in are either served or going to be served by this project. So in terms of the locations that will be served through the BEAD program, I did have a to be determined. I just got an email this morning confirming that at least for the primary project for Bedford County with A2D, it's about 1,300 locations. I have yet to get a precise number for the entire county, but the biggest project is 1,300. And then my rough estimate, when you count in the other projects there, looking at roughly 1,500 to 1,600 locations, give or take. But I should have a more precise number for you all by this time next week. In terms of the key award areas, nothing very scientific about that. I just sort of looked at the areas that stood out to me in terms of various clusters throughout Bedford County. You can see in the Northwest region, Pleasantville and Pigeon Hill are the big awardee areas. Down in the southwestern corner, you can see some, Patience, Pleasantville, Hendon has some clusters, and then not quite as much in the southeastern portion, but Friends Cove did get some locations. And then for the northeast portion, near the Young and Inbrootown area as well. So this is sort of how the BEAD awards look for Bedford County in particular. So there were 4 providers who were awarded funds. technically 5, although Verizon only received, 1 location in Bedford County, but 4 primary providers. So, Amazon, Brightspeed, they applied under the name of Connect Holding, A2D that I mentioned before, and then finally SpaceX. So for Amazon and SpaceX, those 2 projects are in the low Earth orbit or the satellite sphere. So those are projects where, they're hitting very hard to reach individuals sort of scattered throughout the county. Not quite as good of speed as you would hope for, but for folks who had, little to no chance of getting any coverage at all, those are at least some folks that will benefit from this. And I will try to put together a map. I can do that for the county, and really prioritize, which providers are serving the specific locations and have it all put together for you, hopefully sometime next week. But at just a general level, Amazon is mostly concentrated in central and northeast Bedford County. And SpaceX, they're sort of scattered throughout the county. By my count, there was, less than 10 SpaceX locations, so not too much from them. The main 2 are going to be Brightspeed and eCommunity Fiber, also known as A2D. So for Brightspeed, that's also a fiber project, looking mostly at the Chestnut Ridge and the Warrior Ridge parts of the county. By my count, there were, definitely less than 100 locations that were awarded, but I'll try to have those precise numbers for the county. And then, as I mentioned, the big project, most of those dots that you had seen on the previous map have to do with A2D. So approximately 1,300 locations that are going to be served, that are either unserved or currently underserved. And one final note I will make about eCommunity with A2D is that it is an open access network. And so what that means concretely for the residents is A2D will own the infrastructure, but they will also invite a variety of different internet providers to utilize their network and promote greater competition, which, should drive down costs over time. One thing that was really exciting about A2D, and part of the reason why ABI actually partnered with them on this project is, they're offering, 1 gig speeds for, upload and download services for something between, $45 to $65 a month, which is a very affordable rate for, that kind of service. One little note I had at the very bottom there was just for Pennsylvania, I'm sorry, for Bedford County in particular, there were no locations from Comcast. There was, I believe, 1 location in Verizon, for Verizon rather. So most of Bedford County is looking at, these 4 providers.
Before you move on,
Yes,
I just wanted to say, we did not choose these companies.
correct.
The state broadband authority
That's correct,
chose
yes.
those. So, in some cases, maybe only one person submitted, or one company submitted for that, or they had multiple, and then they made that decision.
They
of
did, yes.
who they were gonna go with.
That's a good point. It is PBA's decision to make that, not Bedford County.
I know I get a lot of phone calls with complaints about Brightspeed, so I don't think that's gonna be, they're not gonna be excited about that. How were they selected? Can you answer that?
They did have a rough scoring criterion based on the cost per location before and after the subsidy was given. They had originally the criterion was much stricter. So round 1, so this is,
That was the change in administration at the federal level,
that was
different priorities, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, round 1, for example, this was, November of 2024 through about February of 2025. It was highly concentrated on fiber, for example. And then there was a restructure notice that was given in around June or July of last year, which really kind of shook up the whole landscape and made it so that, satellite could submit a bid, fixed wireless as well. And so that kind of changed the technology a bit. But in terms of I'll try to get some more precise guidance from PBEA on, the exact, milestones and things like that for their criterion. But you are correct, it is worth noting that it was not Bedford County's decision per se. This was up to the Harrisburg office of the Department of Broadband.
Share a little bit more about the open access network and is the map I saw, that was covered quite an extensive part of the county.
It was.
It just explained to the public what that entails.
Yeah, Stephanie, could you actually go back to this, maybe the first? Yeah, here we go. So what you're seeing there, you can see the outline there in red of Bedford County. The blue dots are either unserved or underserved locations being served by this project. And hopefully next time we meet, we actually have an ABI board meeting Wednesday of next week. And I'll try to have a map similar to this, but a map where you can see, exactly which of those blue dots are served by the various providers. Most of what you're seeing right there will be provided by A2D. So when it comes to the open access network, there's sort of three levels that I often hear ISPs talk about, which are owner, operator, provider. So there's the owner of the network, there's the operator, so how that network gets utilized, and then there's the provider, which is, you all as customers receiving, service from the technology there. So when it comes to the owner will be eCommunity Fiber or A2D. And we have an agreement, ABI does, with A2D, and A2D has included this in their application, so they are bound to this, that they will provide what's called an open access network, which means that although A2D, owns the network, they own the infrastructure, they openly encourage other providers to sort of join that network and provide last mile services to the end user. So when you have a variety of different internet providers all using the same infrastructure, over time, you tend to see greater competition, you tend to see lower prices as various ISPs compete against each other to offer better services and things like that, as opposed to a traditional model where, insert ISP's name, they own, operate, and deliver all the services. So once you have, one provider who, is locked down in a certain area, they can, charge higher prices if they determine they would like to. There's more of a monopoly on the services there. With the open access, it's much more competitive, overall leading to lower prices. I don't believe Pennsylvania has had much experience in particular with open access networks, but they're relatively common throughout the country. Our partners, A2D, have a lot of experience with open access networks. So it can be done. It has a good track record of success, but we're pretty excited about bringing an open access network to Bedford County in particular. And I should also say that for this project in particular, it's an 8-county project. So Bedford is one of those 8, as well as the Southern Alleghenies region. So Blair, Bedford, Cambria, Fulton, Huntington, and Somerset counties, as well as Armstrong and Indiana is also in this, large scale network. But that's sort of an overview of what an open access network looks like.
That map. I don't know if you have another map coming up or not, but I'm going to make the assumption, correct me if I'm wrong, that the areas you don't see the blue dots, those are basically the areas being covered by towers. They're there.
Correct. Yeah, so those blue dots are really for, they prioritize either unserved or underserved. So if you don't see, if you see certain bare spots, that could indicate that there's, perhaps a lack of population there. I see some game land areas throughout the map. Those areas could already be covered by existing ISPs, whether that's, fiber, fixed wireless, even satellite. So yeah, for sure that those blue dots are not, the only locations in Pennsylvania getting service, but for this project in particular, those are the dots that are going to be served.
Can I also add, so the lack of dots also is if there are projects that were already
Right.
awarded federal
Yes.
funding
Yes.
through other grants or other funding sources, they were not eligible for funding under BEAD.
Good point, yes. So think of, our NTIA project, for example, those are not included on that. The recently awarded and at this point almost completed CPF Capital Project Fund program that is, at this point almost entirely done. So yes, if locations were previously awarded by either state or federal funds, they will not show up on this map.
If you've followed at all previous meetings, that southeast corner there, I've always talked about it being the hardest to serve, first of all, because of just the logistics, lack of population, difficult area to serve. But that's where those new towers, the 3 new towers are going, and they aren't indicated on this map because they're a project that's ongoing already, correct?
Yeah, so for those towers, the foundations are in. We are waiting on final tower designs to be approved, and then the towers will be going up.
And Bedford County did have control with those towers because we're the ones who are building them.
Yes.
So in terms of, where things stand with BEAD right now and just sort of the immediate next steps, there's the BEAD program has gone through, a variety of different changes over time, both round 1 and round 2. So I didn't want to give a full list of previously accomplished things, but just in terms of the more recently accomplished milestones, back in February, NTIA approved the Pennsylvania Broadband Development Office's final proposal for the BEAD program. We just got notification, actually it was a formal announcement from Governor Shapiro in his office. I believe it was April 28th or April 29th, just a couple of weeks ago at this point, that NTIA as well as NIST. NIST is the National Institute for Standards and Technology. They assist NTIA with, reporting and compliance and things like that. They, approved the special award conditions. So at this point, the next steps are, the execution of contracts. So there is a contract in place between the Pennsylvania Broadband Office and NTIA. The next step is going to be contracts between the Pennsylvania Broadband Office and all of the various awardees for the BEAD program. We have been told that we should expect at least a draft agreement sometime this month. So hopefully, PBD, I know their attorneys are currently working on that to provide it back to the ISPs. Negotiations, I'm sure, will then be undertaken and, hopefully get this executed contracts squared away with either May or possibly June here. So once those contracts get signed, then it's really, wheels up. Then we're talking about planning, engineering work, design, permitting, that kind of thing. Phase 3 being construction. This is the actual physical building of the network. Step 4 there would be network testing. So verifying that, those locations that we were just talking about are receiving adequate speed that the ISPs had provided in their applications. And then, phase 5 would be, making sure that all those dots are connected, doing, media events, getting the word out to the folks know, where projects are being covered and things like that. So those 5 phases are coming from the PBDA office in particular. And that's sort of a rough outline for how we expect the project to progress over the course of, at this point, the next 4 years. So one thing to note is once contracts are signed between PBDA and the various grantees, that starts a 4-year timeline for the project to be completed. There was what we call priority projects that were approved. Some of those projects included promises to deliver speeds or to deliver, the project, not just in 4 years, but actually in 2 years. So some of those dots that you saw will be, constructed and operational well before that 4-year deadline. But 4 years is the longest deadline for most of these projects. Any comments or questions for myself or anyone else regarding BEAD for Bedford County?
Thank you, Dustin.
Absolutely. And before I head out, I won't take too much of your time, but are there any questions that maybe I didn't, present at this PowerPoint, but that you were just at least be interested in knowing about? I know Commissioner, you asked about the scoring criteria, and I can certainly look into that. Anything else that you would like me to communicate, whether it's a comment or a question to either PBDA or NTIA for the BEAD program?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Dustin, could you, just share real briefly, just give a quick update on the NTIA funding?
Yes, and we've had some good movement on that recently. So we are now in the construction phase of NTIA. So a total of 7 tower sites throughout Bedford County. 2 of those are existing sites, but 5 of them are brand new constructed tower sites. We have, selected a construction contractor to complete all of that work. We are still on pace to complete by the project deadline of February of next year. But at this point, it's just a matter of, getting contracts signed and getting it started here in the next few weeks. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. And next we have Stephanie and Aaron Craig to talk about bridges. And you.
Well, Stephanie, I'd take the brunt. She did the hard work with the slides and I'll do talking. Good morning, everybody. I'm Aaron Craig. I am county engineer with ATCS. And so this morning, we just want to talk a little bit about county bridges, the funding situation for bridge improvements, and some options that we have set before us from the state as potential ways to fund projects. So Bedford County, across the county, there are a total of 87 locally owned bridges. So that includes 50 that are owned by municipalities and 37 that the county owns. These are vehicular bridges open to public traffic. This doesn't include a few additional bridges that the county owns that are pedestrian only or historic structures that are closed to traffic. So across the county, 87 locally owned bridges. I'm not sure what the PennDOT count is, but the state owns probably a few hundred within the county, in addition to these 87. So this is a map of the county. This is all of the locally owned bridges. So this includes the county and municipal bridges. And they're color coded, as you can see on the right, good, fair, and poor condition. These are general condition ratings given based on standard bridge inspection practices that are enforced by the Federal Highway Administration. So across the state, across the nation, every bridge that's open to traffic that's 20 feet or greater in length is required to be inspected at least every 2 years. And once they get into certain situations, poor condition being one of those, they are required to be inspected at a more frequent interval. So you can see we do have quite a few on the local network that are in poor condition. This is a map, a little harder to read, but these are just the county-owned bridges. And these are conditions as of 2024, so some of these have changed. But as you can see, in the upper portion of the map, there is a red dot. That is Bridge 2, that's in poor condition. Down at the very bottom, it's really hard to see because it's right on the border with Maryland. That's Bridge 13, also in poor condition. Bridge 13, I'm sorry, that's 33. Bridge 13, which is sort of up in the middle. It's shown as a yellow dot in 2024, but since then has progressed to a red dot. It's in poor condition also. This is a few pictures from County Bridge 33. This is the one that's right along the Maryland border. Due to some inspection findings, I believe it was
last year. There was heavy deterioration to one of the beams on the edge of the bridge, so the county installed some temporary barriers to prevent traffic from using that side of the bridge. So the bridge is currently a single lane, restricted, and there are stop signs at each end to keep people off of the deteriorated beam.
I mean, I asked a question, what is the probability of actual failure of some of these bridges, the bends? I mean, that last picture looks pretty scary to me.
It does. So like I said, these bridges are inspected routinely. Bridge 33 currently is on a 6-month inspection cycle. So every 6 months, there's a team of inspectors that goes out, evaluates the structure, looks for any changes from the previous inspection. And when warranted, they'll do an analysis on the bridge. So they just inspected it in March. They were out there pounding on beams, cleaning rust. They did an analysis. According to the analysis, the bridge still is not required to be load posted, so it's still open to traffic. So that's pretty typical. The bridge safety inspection program in Pennsylvania is pretty robust. The team that's inspecting Bedford's bridges is very well qualified and does a good job. It's not our company. Yeah, so it's a pretty robust program, and it's taken very seriously. I know we've had failures in the past, Fern Hollow Bridge, there's been some others that have made the news. Those are pretty few and far between when we run into situations like that, especially for the bridge types of bridges that we have in Bedford County, which tend to be very redundant. They have multiple beams. There's not as much potential for a catastrophic failure as you saw like on Fern Hollow. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, just following up with that. We're looking for funding, and you have to go out a number of years, and there's so few bridges that get put on the tip, right?
Yeah.
So maybe just briefly
Sure.
refresh
And
everybody's.
yeah. So the last slide was the 3 other bridges that are, 2 of the bridges that are in poor condition, and then the one in the middle, Bridge 41, is currently in fair condition. But as Commissioner Bachman was suggesting, we do like to plan out ahead of time, knowing that it takes time to get these projects funded. We want to get to them before they get to the point where we have a situation like we do on Bridge 33. So on the next slide. So these are some estimates and also an estimated timeline. So the dollar values that you see there are based not on detailed cost estimates, but these are comparable projects from recent past to the bridges that we are looking at. So the county covered bridges require routine maintenance and painting and that type of thing about every 10 years or so. So the last time those were completed was about 5 or 6 years ago. So we're anticipating within the next 5 or so years, we're going to be going out and revisiting those. And so there's 9 covered bridges that are owned by the county. And that's where that $2.4 million comes from. And this is, again, a programming level estimate, including engineering and construction. But as you can see, the other 4 bridges that we talked about, Bridge 2, Bridge 13, Bridge 33, and Bridge 41, also have pretty significant price tags for engineering and construction to do either major rehabilitation work or full replacement of the structure. So $15 million over the next 5 years, if you do the math, that's about $3 million a year. That's more money than the county has in its budget to just go out and do bridge work. And getting to Commissioner Bachman's point, there are multiple streams of funding that the county does have access to for bridge maintenance, rehabilitation, and replacement. Won't get into a lot of details, but some of those include liquid fuels tax. That's the biggest one. Kind of gets that on a. It's paid out multiple times, but basically on an annual basis, they have an allotment that they're allowed to use for roads and bridges. There are some other state funds that come in. One of the other big ones is Act 13, which is Marcellus Shale gas money. That comes into the county on an annual basis also, and that money is restricted to, well, portion of that money is restricted to bridges in poor condition. So we can use that money to take a bridge that's in poor condition and get it out of poor condition. So improve the condition to do it or repair. In addition to that, we do have the traditional TIP funding, as Commissioner Bachman mentioned. So this is the normal programming process that we would go through with the Department of Transportation and the regional planning organization. So in our case, it's Southern Alleghenies, where the entire region prioritizes their bridges based on a scoring criteria that PennDOT has established, which includes a variety of things, including the number of vehicles that use the bridge, the length of a detour, whether or not it's critical for school bus routes and emergency services and various components like that. So based on that scoring, all of the locally owned bridges and the state bridges for that matter get ranked. And then it goes through a vetting process, and based on the ranking and the funding that's available at the state level, certain bridges get selected. Current funding levels, PennDOT is selecting one locally owned bridge per county in our region every 2 years. So as you can see, we have 4 that need to be considered. And if you do the math, one bridge every 2 years, that would take 8 years. And that's assuming that we only looked at county bridges. But currently, the worst of the county bridges is ranked 3rd on the locally owned bridge list in Bedford County. So there are 2 municipal bridges ahead of ours. So with that in mind, the county is looking at other ways to fund these projects. How can we stretch our dollars? How can we make these bridges last, keep them safe, and make sure that the public is able to have access to emergency services and all of the things that we need to cross these bridges. So what happens if the bridges continue to deteriorate? One of the big impacts is weight restrictions. And of course, that can affect emergency services, heating fuel deliveries, which is very common throughout the county. Obviously, school buses, and then delivery vehicles. So your Amazon trucks, your delivery from Lowe's or Home Depot, anything like that can be severely impacted by a posted bridge. And of course, if it continues to deteriorate, it's possible that we could need to close a bridge, and then you have to do detours. And some of the bridges on that list don't have detours. So it's the only access in and out of a neighborhood. And so we have to consider that also.
Do they, when they're looking at funding for TIP, do they consider that, whether there's alternative routes?
Yeah. Yes. Yes, unfortunately, just because there's no alternative route, though, does not guarantee that it's going to be at the top of the list.
Right.
Because there could be another structure that maybe serves a larger population. Gets ahead of it on this. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. And PennDOT's a little bit, they keep their equation very tightly sealed. So we don't actually know how they come up with their risk scores. We do know what goes into it, but the scoring itself is a privately held secret. Otherwise, we would like to know. So one of the options that the state has made available to counties is the $5 registration fee. So this is part of Act 89, as you can see, it was passed in 2013. This fee is able to be collected by counties. The fee is actually collected by PennDOT when you complete your vehicle registration every year. It's $5. It's just tacked on to the state's registration fee. It's $5 per vehicle. And then PennDOT collects all the funds and distributes it directly to the county, and that funding has to be used for roads and bridges. So it's very restricted as far as how it can be spent, but it is basically a user fee. So it's only being charged to people who are registered vehicles who would be using the road network. Currently, there are 25 counties in Pennsylvania that have enacted this user fee. And they are using that money to fund local roads and bridge projects.
Aaron, am I correct to assume that this county doesn't own any roads? We just have bridges, so all of this would go to bridges, is that right?
Well, you are correct to say that the county does not own any roads. However, the county can use this money and can distribute it to other municipalities within the county. So the county can use this for its own bridges. It can also elect to use this for, municipally owned bridges or roads within the county. So just some stats and some other information. 100% of the fees come back to the county. There's no administration cost. PennDOT doesn't charge a fee. They don't take out a cut to administer it. And based on current registration numbers, this would be approximately $330,000 a year annually that the county would potentially have access to if they enacted it to put towards road and bridge project. And there's a kind of a list of what we're allowed to use it for. So it can be used for repairs, maintenance. It can also be used after storm events for emergency cleanups, things like that. Any questions there? Any questions in general?
I think, this whole thing with county bridges is really I found the experience similar to peeling the layers of the onion. You get the initial onion being these 4 bridges to be being presented as needing to be replaced. Yet as I have dug into the inspection reports, I have found, the county has not really addressed the maintenance aspect of these bridges on multiple levels. And I think that, for instance, you take Bridge 33, which is presented as the most critical bridge at the moment. We had discussed with our previous engineer, Layman's, about patching those beams. They had given us a quote on patching the beams, which would have potentially prolonged the life of that bridge, which would allow us time to eventually get it put on the tip or apply for some type of federal funding, being that it's a bridge that impacts both Pennsylvania and Maryland, but impacts the city of Cumberland and their water supply. So there's I would think there would be a real interest from a federal level seeing this bridge addressed, and I think that what was presented to us from Layman's in 2024 when the issue came before us, of course the beam question had been lingering for multiple years prior to that, inspection reports. And, I think that the amount that Layman's that gave us to patch the beams was $145,000. So, I reached out to Scott Roberts at PennDOT last week regarding this Bridge 33, which again is presented as the most crucial bridge. And I said, for this bridge, can the beams be repaired? And he said, I would say yes. He said, now there would be ongoing maintenance costs resulting, and then inevitably, eventually the bridge would need to be replaced at some point. But I think this would give us time, to pursue a federal funding option, and look at getting equipment at some point. You know, because, and I think the other three bridges, I've read the bridge inspection reports for those. You know, the maintenance aspect of these bridges is not being done. On multiple levels, and I think to say that all these four bridges definitely need to be replaced, I don't, you know, what I've read in inspection reports for all four bridges is there's repair work that can be done that can prolong these bridges, you know, beyond what is presented as the replacement need. So, you know, my question is, I think the county would be better served if we would really double down on the maintenance aspect of our bridges, because when I look at the reports, you know, this goes back over 10 years, these bridges not being maintained properly. And so then we're all of a sudden presented with this bridge needs to be replaced. But yet on the inspection reports, it says repair or replace. It just doesn't say replace. So my question is, why don't we spend more time on repairing our bridges, addressing those concerns, instead of just saying, well, we got to replace this bridge, we got to replace a $5 million bridge. You know, that in inspection reports themselves lists, you know, things that we can do to prolong the life of these bridges. You know, we can paint, they've not been painted, as they're all not being painted. Rust, you know, goes in the beams, and then the rust isn't addressed, and then the rust gets worse, and then pretty soon the rust eats a hole in the bridge. When several years ago, it could have been addressed from a maintenance aspect, you know, of really taking care of these bridges. And I'm personally not convinced at this point that we're doing what we need to be doing, and that these bridges are being presented as being replaced, but the inspection reports I have read that don't show that. It shows a lot of repair work. I mean, it mentions the word replace, but that's not necessarily the only option that's presented in the inspection reports. Like I said, this has been an onion for me. This is my third year in office, and one thing I've learned my third year is trust but verify. And so I the information is given, I trust it, but I also look for ways to verify it, you know, and answer a lot of questions as a result. And I think that as a county, we really need to double down on the aspect of maintenance and taking re-looking at these four bridges and saying, what can we do instead of having this projected tear down date and rebuild date? What can we do from a maintenance aspect to repair these bridges with the funding we have in place and prolong the life of them, and then look at trying to get some, you know, schedule, or from a federal standpoint, especially Bridge 33. And that's my perspective. I mean, it's you know, I think the residents of Bedford County deserve that from a county standpoint. We need to be, I think we need to set up some type of strategic plan when it comes to bridge maintenance, and making sure that these things are being addressed.
I would agree 100%. I think one of the challenges that we have faced over the years, one is that traditionally, and PennDOT has changed their focus probably in the last 10 years. Traditionally, it was very difficult to get funding for maintenance and repair work. That has been changing. It's still very difficult for local bridges to get programmed for maintenance and repair work on the tip. And so the funding available is somewhat restricted to whatever the county has available. Now, there are different funding streams we talked about before. In addition to that, there are some grant sources. But the county is currently pursuing some grant funding opportunities through DCED and through PennDOT. But yes, I agree. Moving forward, and I know that there are work plans on the table to develop a strategic plan for capital asset management. which I think would be very valuable, because you're right, it's, Yeah.
Are you agreeing though that these 4 bridges don't need to be replaced, that we can just repair all 4 of them?
no. I guess I don't agree 100% with that statement. I think at this point, there, I haven't looked at in depth at Bridge 13, but I know the other 2, it would be very questionable whether or not we could repair them. As far as Bridge 2 and Bridge 33. Bridge 33, we could potentially repair, but it would be a short-term fix. Because the beams have deteriorated to a state where they're going to need to be replaced at some point. And then not to just.
PennDOT also changed their inspection, not window inspection procedures, but they've updated and they're doing more thorough inspections as a result of some bridge failures at other locations.
Yes and no. So the standard procedures have been the same really probably for the last 20 plus years. However, their oversight and their enforcement of those procedures has definitely changed over that time period. So they are taking much closer look now than they were 25 years ago at the inspection reports and how things are being recorded and documented on all this types of things. Because we have had issues, there were holes, loopholes in the system and things were being missed. But as far as the criteria, there have been some tweaks. So some things now that would have been coded fair in the past now are considered poor. But those have really been pretty minor. The bigger issue is there's been a greater alignment of from the feds all the way down to the local inspectors, making sure that everyone's looking at the same things with the same amount of scrutiny and making sure that they're current and up to date. Any other questions?
Are we able to put this presentation the slides that you, on our website?
Yeah, absolutely.
I will go back to the point, the inspection reports do say, replace or repair. It's both options, and all 4 reports for this bridge, because it doesn't just say replace, just to clarify.
Yes, yes, that is true. And as an inspector, I mean, there's always a repair option. It's not always the best use of funds because it may not be a permanent fix, but it could improve the situation for a duration of time. But I think there's always going to be a repair or replace option, unless it gets to the point where repair is really infeasible. Then at that point, you're probably looking at a bridge closure and just a replacement.
It's kind of like with a car,
Yeah. You have to weigh it out.
or, if it's just replacing tires, you can keep it longer, but if it's a really costly fix, do you want to spend the money that you could put towards the new vehicle into a repair that maybe the car is getting old and, it's
Yeah.
always a balancing act of what's the
Absolutely.
best use of money.
I have a 2007 Nissan Sentra that needs $25 or $2,500 worth of, suspension work. The vehicle itself is only worth $2,500. Do I spend that money to fix the car, or do I take that and put it into a new vehicle? Yeah, that's exactly what we have to deal with the bridges. Some of it is, it's a judgment call. And we make our best judgment. Try to. Each case.
Bottom line is, no matter whether you replace or repair, you still have to have the funding
Right.
to do the work.
Correct.
That's the bottom line. If the funding is not available, we're in trouble either way.
And looking back over the history of the county, getting back to bridge replacement. A typical bridge project that goes through the TIP process, if it has federal funds involved, federal funding would be 85%, state funding would be 15%, and the county share would be 5%. which is fantastic for the county. Great deal for the state too. If it doesn't get federal funding, then typically it's an 80-20 split. So if the state's paying 80 and the county's paying 20. Still a pretty good deal for the county, but 20% of $1 million is still a lot more than the county typically has available. So there, if you go back 25 years or so through county history, there were several projects that were done and the county contributed funds. And so a lot of our liquid fuels money, our Act 13 funds, were put into those 20% matches or the 5% matches. And so there wasn't a big reserve to continue to do large maintenance and rehabilitation projects. So it's a very difficult challenge to overcome. I think in the past, the county has done a pretty good job of making those decisions, but unfortunately, knowing the funding situation coming from PennDOT with one local bridge getting programmed every 2 years, that's also a challenge. If we're third on the list and nothing changes, that means our first bridge isn't happening until, isn't getting programmed for 3 cycles, which is 6 years down the road, which means it's not going into construction for potentially 8 years. So those are the types of things that we're weighing out and having to make decisions based on.
And the other option with that is retroactive reimbursement, where the county has to front the money for the bridge and then get to speed up that timeline of the bid
Right.
process.
And that's also not guaranteed.
Yeah.
Because we could front the money and then if PennDOT doesn't have funding to reimburse us, we carry that until they potentially do, or they just decide that they're not going to reimburse. So it's a risk.
That's only 80%.
And that's right, 80-20. So PennDOT District 9 doesn't like to do projects that way unless they're small, so that they know that they can reimburse the local bridge owners. So typically they like to see those on very small projects, usually box culverts or something like that. Any other questions?
Anybody ever thought of leasing a bridge?
Leasing a bridge. I would love to lease you a bridge.
We should open up a leasing company. They're gonna build bridges and charge the county a monthly fee
So,
for the rest of their life.
yeah.
That's what it would be.
So there is, the state does have a P3 program, which is a public-private partnership. They have done many projects, well, not many projects. They have done several projects, many bridges, using that type of model, where there's a private entity that comes in and builds the bridges, and then it's on a 20-year payback schedule. That entity owns the bridge, maintains it,
Right.
et cetera, until they turn it back over to the state. It's feasible. There's a lot of hoops to jump through
Just curious.
to do it.
I
Yeah.
mean, it causes problems.
Thinking outside the box there, so.
Thank you.
Doing on the screen.
No.
Rather than killing anybody.
Oh.
Okay, we'll move on to new business now. Under new business, we have a motion to act on change of assessment notice control for the month of April 2026, based on the recommendation of Nicole Abbott, Director of Tax Assessment Office.
So moved.
I'll second.
Having a first and a second, any additional comments on this? I would like to say that again, this month, I've seen an increase in assessment values of over $1 million. So fantastic job you're doing down there.
Thank you.
Okay, having a first and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion will carry. Next, we have a motion to act on the approval of the space available agreement between Bedford County, County of Bedford and Central County's Youth Center of Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, effective July 1st, 2026 till June 30th, 2027. June 30th, 2027. unless earlier terminated. This is based upon the recommendation of Chris Bresco, Administrator of Bedford County Children and Youth Services.
So moved.
I'll second.
Having a first and second, do you have any different comments? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion will carry. Now we have a motion to act on the approval of child accounting and profile system applications provider agreement between Avanco International LLC and Bedford County Children and Youth Services, Bedford County Consulting Services Admin, effective July 1st, 2026, based upon the recommendation of Chris Bresco, Administrator of Bedford County Children and Youth Services.
So moved.
Second.
Having a first and a second, any additional comments? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That motion will carry. Now we have a motion to approve the county assistance agreement between the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania acting through the Department of Corrections and Bedford County based upon the recommendation of Warden Joseph Eichenlaw.
So moved.
Second.
Having a first and a second, any additional comments? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion will carry. Next, we have a motion to approve a proclamation for ALS awareness for the month of May 2026, based upon the recommendation of Bedford County Commissioners. And I believe Stephanie's going to read this for us. Thank you.
I'm first going to read a letter that was the request for you guys to consider this proclamation. My name is Kimberly, and I'm a constituent from Saxton, PA. I'm writing to you as someone personally impacted by ALS. ALS, often known as Lou Gehrig's disease, is a progressive and terminal disease that affects mobility, speech, and ultimately the ability to breathe. It impacts not only the person diagnosed, but entire families and communities. I respectfully request that you officially recognize May 2026 as ALS Awareness Month. An ALS Awareness Month proclamation or resolution would help educate the public about the realities of this devastating disease, honor individuals and families living with ALS, recognize caregivers and healthcare providers, and demonstrate our state's commitment to supporting those impacted. Public recognition from state leaders brings visibility to ALS and reminds families like mine that we are seen and supported. The ALS Association works in communities across our state to provide care services, equipment, advocacy, and research support. An official proclamation would strengthen these efforts and raise awareness statewide. Thank you for your leadership and your considering this request. I would be honored to provide additional information. Sincerely, Kimberly Keith, living with ALS. Now I'm going to read the proclamation for you. Whereas, if I mispronounce this, I apologize. Whereas amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, also commonly known as Lou Gehrig's disease, is a progressive, fatal neurodegenerative disease in which a person's brain loses connection with their muscles, slowly reducing a person's ability to walk, talk, eat, and eventually breathe. And whereas thousands of new amyotrophic lateral sclerosis cases are reported every year, and estimates show that every 90 minutes someone is diagnosed with ALS and someone passes away from ALS. And whereas on average, patients diagnosed with ALS survive only 2 to 5 years from the time of diagnosis. And whereas the exact causes of ALS are unknown and there is no known cure for ALS. And whereas people who have served in the military are more likely to develop ALS and die from the disease than those with no history of military service. And whereas securing access to new therapies, durable medical equipment, and communication technologies is of vital importance to people living with ALS. And whereas clinical trials play a pivotal role in evaluating new treatments, enhancing quality of life, and fostering assistive technologies for those living with ALS. And whereas the ALS Association is the largest philanthropic funder of ALS research globally and has committed more than $154 million to support more than 550 projects across the United States and 18 other countries. And whereas the ALS Association is committed to make ALS livable and cure it for everyone, everywhere. And whereas Amyotrophic Lateral Sclerosis Awareness Month provides an opportunity to increase public awareness for the dire circumstances of people living with ALS. acknowledge the terrible impact this disease has on those individuals and their families, and support research to eradicate this disease. Now therefore, we, the Bedford County Commissioners, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2026 as ALS Awareness Month. We call upon all Americans to join in supporting ALS research, advocating for increased funding, and standing in solidarity with those affected by this relentless disease.
Thank you.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Having a first and second, any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion will carry. Next, we have a motion to approve the proclamation of National Small Business Week for May 3rd through the 9th, 2026, based upon recommendations of Bedford County Commissioners. And I believe there is nobody here to read that proclamation, so I'm going to say we just approve it as shared. It's application time.
I'll second.
Having a first and second, any further discussions on that? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That motion will carry. Next, we have a motion to act on the approval of proclamation for National Police Week, May 10th to the 16th, 2026, based upon the recommendation of Ashley Clark, the district attorney. And Ashley, I believe you're going to read that for us.
So actually, Ruth Smith is going to read that
Okay.
for us. The district attorney's office did not want to miss the opportunity to recognize our law enforcement agencies. We have a jury trial going on in courtroom number 1. One of our other assistant attorneys is doing an intensive workshop in State College today. I just completed juvenile court. So Ruth Smith is our office administrator / paralegal / basically everything in our office. So I volunteered her that she got to read the National Police Week proclamation. So I'm going to turn it over to her.
Great, here we go. Whereas the Bedford County Commissioners recognize the vital role that law enforcement officers play in maintaining public safety, upholding the rule of law, and protecting the right and freedoms of all citizens. And whereas National Police Week, observed May 10th through 16th, 2026, is a time to honor the services and sacrifices of law enforcement officers across the nation and to pay tribute to those who have lost their lives in the line of duty. And whereas law enforcement professionals throughout Bedford County demonstrate unwavering courage, integrity, and dedication while facing increasingly complex challenges. And whereas these men and women work tirelessly, often at great personal risk, to prevent crime, respond to emergencies, support victims, and build trust within the communities they serve. And whereas the partnership between law enforcement agencies and Bedford County is essential to assuring justice is fairly, impartially, and effectively administered. And whereas it is fitting and proper to recognize sacrifices made by law enforcement officers and their families, and to express our deepest gratitude for their continued service. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the Bedford County Board of Commissioners hereby recognizes May 10th through 16th, 2026 as National Police Week in Bedford County, Pennsylvania. In witness whereof, this proclamation is hereby adopted this 12th day of May, 2026.
Thank you.
Make that motion. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, officer. Do for us as well. Okay,
I'll make your motion.
and motions, I'll second, having a first and a second, is there any additional comments?
I just have a brief comment. I just really want to thank the state trooper for attending our meeting this morning here and just for the service of law enforcement, our community and keeping us safe. And I think a lot of the work they do, especially in today's era, they seem to come under a lot of verbal assault and people speaking negatively about them. But really, we are so thankful to have our law enforcement and the protection and just the sacrifices they make on a daily basis. When the weather's poor and there's an accident, there's a trooper out there responding to the call, and someone's broke down along the highway. You often see a trooper stop to lend a helping hand. I've been in that situation where I had a car issue and a trooper stopped, said, okay, and I appreciated that. I can't say enough how much I appreciate that. And so if you could pass that message along, we would appreciate it.
Okay, having a first and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion will carry. Next, we have a motion to act on the approval of the Area Agency on Aging Joint Resolution adopted May 2026, based upon the recommendation of Connie Rose, Director of the Area Agency on Aging. And Connie's not here to read that for us today also, so in an effort to save time, we'll go ahead and make it as written.
So moved.
Second?
Having a first and second, are there any further comments? Hearing none, those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion will carry. Next, we have a motion to adopt the ordinance number 05.12.2026, implementation of a fee for local use, allowing the county to impose a $5 fee for each non-exempt vehicle registered to the address located within its borders. This is based upon a recommendation of Bedford County Commissioners.
So moved?
Second.
Having a first and a second. Is there any further comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Good. That motion will carry. Next, we have a motion to act on the approval of following personal actions received by department heads for March 2026 as listed.
So moved.
I'll second.
Having a first and a second, do we have additional comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion will carry. Next, we have commissioner comments. We have no bid opening, so would you have any comments you'd like to take us in? I would like to say that under that $5 fee, that $5 fee does generate $330,000 to the county for nothing but bridges and roads. Of that fee, if that had to fall on, that goes to all people who have a motor vehicle. Everybody pays that fee if you have a licensed motor vehicle. If that fee fell on taxpayers alone, that would amount to another 2% tax increase. So rather than putting it in a small pot of local people who have property that would pay that fee, it goes out to all registered licensed. Having said that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to our salary board. Our salary board, a roll call. President is myself, Commissioner Wayne, Commissioner Bachman, and was the follower secretary treasurer. First order of business, we approve of the minutes for April 14th, 2026.
So moved.
Take a second.
I'll second.
Having a first and a second, any additional comments? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion will carry. We have nothing under old business. We'll go straight to our new business, which is a motion to act on the approval of wages or, excuse me, or as by union contracts for the following personnel based upon the recommendation of their respective department heads for April as listed.
Motion.
Second. Having a first and a second, any additional comments? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion will carry, and our next meeting will be held on June 9th, 2026, unless called sooner by the board. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. I thank you all for attending, for all your participation.